NGCC, both CCP officials is also outlined. My God, member pa ng Communist Party of the Philippines. You read it, of China. Communist Party of the China.
Enzo-Recto, kalaban ang katiwalian at kasinungalingan, kakampi sa katotohanan at kabutihan.
Nakakaalarma po ito mga kabunyog, lalo na sa national security ng bansa, dahil napabalita po na yung dalawang top official ng Ngcp na taga-China ay espiya pala. Hay naku! Yan kasi, pinayagan ni Digong noon na mag-invest at maghimasok ang mga ito. Yan tuloy, naging sakit ng ulo ngayon ni Marcos Jr. Anyway, kung nasundan po ninyo ang balita hinggil dito, na ang may-ari ng 40% ng Ngcp ay mga dayuhang taga-China. At sa bagong balita na diskubre daw ng mga taga-kamara na nagre-report po ang dalawang top official na ito sa kanilang bansa. Na kung saan hindi dapat gawin dahil ito ay ginagawa lang ng isang espiya, lalo na ito ay palihim at patago. Anyway, para po sa karagdagan pang balita, panoorin po natin ito.
Inusisa sa Kamara ang umano'y pagre-report ng dalawang Chinese officials ng National Grid Corporation of the Philippines sa Communist Party ng China. Question din ang foreign ownership ng NGCP na lagpas umano sa nakasaad sa batas.
Pinanga ng House Committee on Ways and Means ang dalawang Chinese official umano ng National Grid Corporation of the Philippines o NGCP na nagre-report umano sa Communist Party ng China.
Ang sinasabi ko lang na nag-report sila sa CCP.
About what's happening in the
Each year.
about their management of the NGCP.
Yes.
That's what they're reporting.
Yeah.
Suspicious.
They're not, hindi dapat nila ginagawa yun.
Inirekomenda ng komite na ipatawag ang NGCP chairperson na isang Chinese national. Inungkat pa ng komite ang pagmamay-ari at management ng NGCP. Base sa konstitusyon, hanggang 40% lang dapat ang pag-aari ng mga dayuhan sa kahit anong public utility. Pero sabi ng komite, bukod sa 40% ng NGCP na pag-aari ng State Grid Corporation of China, may ibang porsyento pang hawak umano ang mga dayuhan. Ang Synergy Grid and Development Philippines kasi, na may-ari ng 60% ng NGCP, may mahigit 7% foreign ownership umano.
Kino-question din namin po yung legality po ng kanilang stature dahil dinalabag nila yung batas ng PSA pati ng konstitusyon patungkol po sa 60-40 ruling pagdating sa public utilities.
Actually, Mr. Chair, in compliance with the ERC resolution, we have suspended starting August 2023 billing the pass-on of the 3%.
Pero you don't recognize any fundamental basis for a retroactive refund?
We just complied with the ERC resolution, suspending it.
May I ask
Starting
the
August
ERC if you could consider that it should be retroactive?
We will resume our discussions on that, Mr. Chair.
Since the basis was actually an ESCRA in 2002 on Meralco, wherein it excluded income tax from the computation of the rate base in computing the RORB. So in other words, it preceded 2011, or even preceded the grant of franchise to NGCP. So anyway, may I make my very long presentation on an assignment that was essentially so don't feel bad, huh? May I make this presentation on NGCP? The key issues with the tax regime of the NGCP. Next. In terms of franchise, NGCP is now very unique. It is the only major power sector player not imposed SIT, VAT, and RPT. It's all no until it goes with NGCP. No, franchise tax yes, with franchise yes. So the rest, Aboitiz, Miracle, Maynilad, Manila Water, they're all paying SIT, they're paying RPT, they're paying VAT. Next. NGCP's franchise tax is the lowest franchise tax rates ever imposed by legislative fiat. Well, that is a policy or an affirmative policy during that time. So that, admittedly, I was part of the what they call Economic Manager +1 of Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So you can get a better price for NGCP, so the franchise tax was brought down to only 3% to make it more sellable. So I guess,
Progress.
okay. So next, mabuti na yung we correct our historical mistakes. Among the past and present owners of National Grid, only NGCP was exempted from income tax without having any conditionalities on income. Napocor is exempt, shall be non-profit, and shall devote its return. Section 13, RA 968. Transco, the net profit in any of the Transco shall be remitted to PISAM. Section 18, RA 9136. NGCP is exempt from income with no conditions on profit or income. In short, even if it exceeds its PBR in nominal or aggregate terms, there is no process, neither obligation to disgorge or to return the excess payments to consumers, which is now embodied in many of the new laws, including the Foreign Investment Act, the PSA, as well as even the franchise of Bulacan Ecozone, wherein anything above 12% belongs to the state and therefore shall be considered tax. Next. There's no explicit reasonable rate of return clause. NGCP is unique in that among sensitive sectors, no law expressly stipulates a mechanism for capping its profits. The ERC regulates it under its powers in IPIRA. Well, I believe naman po ako sa ERC in general. But to look at the other entities, SMRCT, internal rate of return of 12%. Anything above 12 goes back to government. PPP, the new PPP code, reasonable rate of return set by regulatory agency. Anything above is disgorged or is returned to the public or its users. Public Services Act 11569, recovery of prudent and efficient cost and reasonable rate of return by the administrative agency. Again, anything above is disgorged or returned to the consumers. Business engaged in prime commodities, RA 7581, a fair return on investment. Price cannot be more than 10% of its price in the immediately preceding month. Power distribution, RA 9136, retail rate shall be subject to the principle of full recovery and reasonable economic cost. Transmission, NGCP, no specific stipulation that would cap profit levels. ERC, through its powers under IPIRA, regulates NGCP solely through a 5-year PBR projecting required future revenues. Next. Instead, the rate of return is determined through the performance-based, which is highly dependent on accurate WACC. So, if you look at this, essentially the level of return is 12% per annum benchmark or WACC derived from market data. And then WACC is critical in determining profit cap for NGCP. This is why direct listing in the stock market would have been beneficial to the consumer. Instead, it was the parent that was listed, so there is a disconnect. Next. I calculated the WACC for NGCP. The risk-free rate is 6.23%. Of course, I asked Leia with the Monetary Board. The beta is based on Barron's, 0.28. Country risk rate is 2.19. New York Stern. Equity risk premium is 6.52. The calculated cost of equity is 8.7. The cost of debt is 12.7 according to the ERC. So the existing WACC is 15.04, which is almost close to the PBR. So the equity right now is 58.8%. The debt is 41.2%. But as any financier would do, that debt and equity are virtually are virtually can be transmissible. So, the result of the 2023 ERC partial review is 2016-2020 WACC is 10.71, which is closer to what we found out. Next. Excess NGCP revenues. ERC preliminary review. 2016, NGCP revenue 77, ERC approved revenue 36.7. So there is a 204.3 billion that has been computed by the ERC as being in excess of its WACC. And there is no provision in law. That's the problem. For disgorgement, or, you know, ever since I became a congressman, almost every law I put that pertains to regulated, whether regulated industries, I always make sure that anything above WACC belongs to the people or belongs to the state. If it's PPP, it belongs to the state because they're actors on behalf of the state. If it's a franchise that deals with the consumers, then the excess revenues belongs to the consumers. And there should be a process of disgorgement, of repayment. And so far, I think I haven't seen, except for those that arise from Supreme Court rulings. Next. The income tax determination in the electricity transmission and distribution sectors create a disparity in favor of the transmission sector. This is by Joel Yu, 2021, Taxes Takes Report for the BSP. Next. Other issues. Next. Something's very wrong recently. There's apparently been a lot of buying, mostly local. So there's been a shifting of the ownership of, I come from the stock market, so I smell one when I see you. I can smell one. There is that belated attempt to regularize, because dati na yung SGCC owns 40%. Since under the PSA, anything above 40 should be owned by a Filipino. Since SGP is listed, there should be no foreign ownership of SGP at all. So now, next, there is a 7.8%. Can you show the 7.8? Okay, next. Well, the NGCP has denied that it is controlled by the State Grid Corporation of China, and it has no executive that are Chinese national. Each chairman is not Chinese, and that's against the law. A top official, and this committee or some other committees, because at a certain point next week, the speaker would like to transfer this to Quinta for Murang Kuryente. A top official of the SGC, despite Synergy Grid of the Philippines supposedly being a larger shareholder than the State Grid Corporation of China, because SGP owns 60% and should be 100% Filipino, but it's not. Next. Mahuhuli ko kayo. As a public utility under public as amended, only 40% of its equity can be owned by foreigners. 40% of the NGCP is already owned by the State Grid of China. The other 60% is shared by Monte Oro and Calaca, both Filipino companies, which are in turn layered by two more layers of Filipino companies. Next. When corporation is under layers of intervening corporations, the Supreme Court, under Justice Presbitero, the father of our former speaker, and now the chairman of the Committee on Energy, says the grandfather rule applies. We opine that we must look into the citizenship of individual stockholders, natural persons of that investor corporation, in order to determine if the constitutional and statutory restrictions are complied with. If the shares of stock of the immediate investor corporation is in turn held and controlled by another corporation, then we must look into the citizenship of the individual stockholders. Nothing has been clearer than ever before. And it is initiated by the father of our former speaker, LAV. As a corollary, the 60-40 Filipino to foreign equity ratio is apparently met by subject or investing corporations that resort to the grant funds necessarily if that exists as to the locus of the beneficial ownership and control. In this case, a further investigation as to the nationality and personalities, then I guess it redounds to Congress, given its plenary powers to investigate and to inquire that laws are being followed. So this is a resolution under nickel mining and development, Disor mining, etc. in 2015. Next. Some of the sources of datos to NGCP's ownership and control. Each chairman is from NGCC, despite the SGP being supposedly owning 60% of it. So they gave it to the 40%. Official sources from the Chinese government suggest an active control and management. We look at all the papers of the Politburo and it's there. Unbelievable. They keep writing it. So SGP has 2 additional layers of subsidiaries for its indirect ownership over NGCP. Next. The board of directors of the NGCP is here. Xu Guangchao. And at a certain point, once we're given a mandate under Quinta, we will definitely ask for his presence to explain his role. There's no other way. Otherwise, para saan pa, tigilan na natin itong mga batas na to. Let's close down Congress. Next. The official website of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative says the state grid gained the right to run the Philippine grid. It's their own words. Next. An official paper by the 2 top officials of NGCC, both CCP officials, is also outlined. My God, member pa ng Communist Party of the Philippines. You read it, of China. Communist Party of the China. You read it. SGID foreign-based team of senior managers is deeply involved in the decision-making for major operating matters of overseas holding companies such as strategic planning, business plans, financial budgets, senior management, putting the advanced management concept and excellent technical experience of NGCC, well, that should be good, into effect in the development planning and daily work of the overseas operation. The SGID headquarters has set up overseas operations management. That is from their own mouth. Including management appointments and removals. So it's not just the hiring, but the firing. Next. Leading the Beltway again. If you read this, it clearly shows this is, if you wanna source, this is the paper. Just marunong ka kasi mag-inchik eh. Next. So the foreign shareholders of SGP, this is where one of the violations appear. And that is why there was this scrummage for localizing the ownership of SGP for the past 2 weeks. That's why the price cave goes up, because the foreigners have to sell. They need to localize. So as you can see, percentage of total foreign ownership of SGP is 7.48%. That is based on the PSE records. This is clearly a violation. I worked for 7 years in the Philippine stock market. I worked for Swiss Bank. And one of my jobs is to look for... Next. Can Congress still amend the NGCP franchise to make its tax and profit structure fair? Yes. Section 2, Terms and Conditions. This franchise shall be for a term of 50 years from date of effectivity is hereby granted and on condition that it shall be subject to amendment, alteration, or repeal by Congress when the common good so requires. Next. Proposal 1. NGCP's compliance with listing rules should be used as a market benchmark for cost of equity. Don't let NGCP have its cake and eat it too. NGCP comply with the listing requirement under its franchise through SGP, which controls 67% of One Taipan and Pacifica Holdings, which in turn fully owns Monte Oro and Calaca High Power, which in turn own 30% each of the common stock of NGCP. This is a highly opaque structure that allows SGP's owners to minimize tax liabilities through tax-exempt status of intercorporate dividends and minimize, and therefore, the rule of the presbyterial rule with respect to inquiring into the direct ownership or the citizenship or the personalities of the owners is pretty much justified. SGP should only be considered as compliance with the listing requirement under the NGCP franchise. That's good enough. If it is also used as the benchmark for the beta component of the WACC, then that's another thing, Madam ERC. This would dramatically reduce the allowed profits since SGP, a mere holding company, is a low volatility stock. So I don't know whether would you like to have your cake or you want to eat it too? Attorney Sanjay, I don't know whether you can speak for the company. So, pwede ba ito na lang gamitin natin for the computation of the WACC? Because the beta of holding companies are much lower than operating companies. Next. Proposal 2. Subject NGCP to a national security review by the IIPCCC. The NGCP investment qualifies under Section 69, Rule 12 of the FAIR. Upon order of the President made by a foreign government-controlled entity or state-owned entity, except independent pension fund, sovereign-owned wealth funds, and multinational. The exception being shall not apply if the fund is incorporated in or controlled by a foreign. Second, for violations of anti-dummy law, again, this is the presbyterial rule. The penalty or forfeiture of such right, franchise, privilege, and property or business enjoyed or acquired in violation of the Provisions Act may be imposed. I don't know whether we want to go this far. Next. Proposal 3. Subject NGCP to all regular taxes as in the case of water distribution utilities. Shifting from a franchise tax to a seat-based regime is also quite common in Congress, including SMART recently. Revenues can be earmarked towards a Pantawid Kuryente subsidy scheme, especially for land. It's time for the corporation, not for government or ordinary taxpayers to drink Coke and pay taxes. I think corporations should do their part. So I'm talking here about the incidence of taxes. Next. Proposal 4. Subject NGCP to a fixed reasonable rate of return. Until the adoption of the PBR, it was customary to impose a 12% RORB or IRR for strategic industries. Next. Tapos na, no? Windfall tax on excess profits. Disgorgement is allowed by under IPIRA. Remedies shall without limitation include the imposition of price controls, issuances of injunctions, requirements of the investment or disgorgement of excess profits, and imposition of fines and penalties. So, I was part of the people who wrote IPIRA together with Popo. And the word disgorgement is always, the author is always me. I always believe of the power of the state to disgorge excess profits because corporations must share. Profits in extreme excess, extreme na, excess pa, of required revenues under PBR can be taxed with revenues going towards a Pantawid Kuryente scheme. So all these actually are being made in anticipation of a possible transfer of how do you call that, mandate for this particular topic to. And next, recommendations of the committee to the House outside the WACC jurisdiction. We want to call in Chairman Mr. Xu Guangchao to explain his role in the Board of Directors. I hope he is inactive. I hope is initiate congressional hearings to determine whether NGCP is in violation of the anti-dummy law based on the Presbyterian ruling. Revisit ERC rate setting methodology on NGCP, particularly WACC setting. Which one do you use? NGCC, SGCC, or a proxy, or SGC, or SGP? Explore amendment to the... Natakot na kayo, no? Okay lang, mabait naman ako. Pakapin mo muna siya. Solo ka ba dito? Isang tambak bang kasama mo? Explore amendment to the NGCP franchise to decouple systems operator and network transmission role. Pwede ba? Ano na lang kayo? Taga-rent na lang kayo ng equipment sa gobyerno and let the government run it? I think some people are starting to believe that the government should own, but the facilities can be owned, but the management of those facilities is invested with national interest. Next. So that is quite.
Yan mga kabunyog, na panood po natin ang balita at ang nasabing hearing. Dito po nasaksihan natin na itong mga nasa NGCP na mga dayuhan ay may balak na kontrolin ang ating supply ng kuryente na wag naman sanang mangyari. Dapat aksyonan na ito ng ating gobyerno bago pa mahuli ang lahat. Anyway, dito na lang po ang aking topic. Mabuhay po tayo mga kabunyog.
Bunyog, bunyog, halikan na kasama ka. Bunyog, kapag buklod ay may pag-asa. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, isa ang pananaw. Sa bagong Pilipinas ang bunyog isisigaw.